Hi everyone, welcome back to the Digital Build Room. Today we will be looking at another Excel function, the count function. So let's get started. Here we have some Excel dummy data that we're going to be using to illustrate the count function. This dummy data includes order ID, so the individual order ID itself, an item name, quantity of those individual items within that order, the location of that item within the warehouse, the status of that order, and the region in which the order is going to be delivered to. We're going to be going through a few different functions related to count today. The first one being the count function, second one being count A, third being count blank, fourth being count if, and finally COUNTIFS with an S. Here I've got a summary section within this spreadsheet that we're going to be completing, filling in with the different count functions. So the very first one that we're going to be completing today is the total number of orders, and we're going to be using the count function for that. So equals count, and as you can see as you're typing, it brings up a list of the individual functions, but it also gives you a handy little tooltip as to what that function does. So as you can see, the count function counts the number of cells in a range that contain numbers. Really important that it contains numbers. It's not the number of cells that are not blank, it's the number of cells that contain a number. So that's really important when understanding which data point or which column or row or whatever range it is that you're referencing within that data. It's really important that you understand that data, understand the implications of what functions you're using. So equals count, open brackets. We're going to be using the order ID column for this. Now remember, we're using the order ID column because it's got a numeric value. If we were to use the item column, it would return 0 because there's no numeric values within that. So if we were to highlight that, close brackets, enter, as you can see, according to this, there's 0 orders, even though we've highlighted all of these, and we know their values in there because the specific function is looking for a numeric value. So equals count, and we're going to use the order ID, close brackets. So 17 orders, let's check that. There we are. So if we look up at the top here, as I'm highlighting, you can see there are 17 rows, 1 column. So 17 rows means 17 orders. This matches. So next, we're going to look at count A. So equals count A. So let's look at the tooltip. Counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. So really important differentiation between count and count A. This doesn't look at the number of cells that have a number or not. It just looks at whether or not the cell is completed with a value or it's completely empty and discounts those. So we're going to use count A to count the number of orders with a delivery address confirmed, and we're going to be denoting whether the delivery address is confirmed by using the delivery region column. So count A, open brackets, highlight the full range, close brackets. As you can see, there's 16 orders with a delivery region confirmed. There's 17 orders in total, 16 of which has a delivery region confirmed because that one is still pending, awaiting a delivery region to be confirmed. And then we have the opposite of this. We're going to be using count blank, is to look at the number of orders awaiting a delivery address. There's two ways you could do that. You could do count blank and look at the number of cells that are blank within the delivery region, and it gives you 1. Alternatively, you could just use the data that you've already calculated from count and count A to determine the opposite. So which would just be equals that cell and then a minus that cell. So the total number of orders, take away the number of orders where the delivery address is confirmed, must mean that we're awaiting a delivery address for one item. So it's totally up to you how you want to use that. Depending on performance, you might want to use different functions. But for this case here, we have a fairly small data, we have an incredibly small data set. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't really affect performance. So let's put that back to count blank. Perfect. So we've covered count A, and count blank. Remember, count is the number of cells with a number. Count A is the number of cells that are not blank. Count blank is the opposite. It's the number of cells that are blank. Next, we're going to be looking at counting the number of cells in a range where a status value, in this case, is equal to pending. And we're going to be using the function COUNTIF for that. So equals COUNTIF. As you can see, counts the number of cells within a range that meet the given condition. So let's open that. So really important you look at these tooltips as well here, because they give you some idea as to how to lay out your formulas. So COUNTIF, and we're going to be telling it what range to look at. So in this case, we want to look at all of the cells within the status range. So in this case, we're going to be highlighting the full status data set, but it needs to know, well, what am I counting? You know, what should the value be that I count based on that particular range? So it's going to look at cells E2 to E18, and it's only going to count the number of cells that equal this particular criteria. So you can type in the word pending, and make sure you put it in double quotes as well. Otherwise, it's going to start looking for cell ranges named after certain ranges. Numerics obviously don't need to be in double quotes, but you need to make sure that it's a numeric value that you're counting. But in this case, we're going to be looking at a text string, and therefore we're going to be putting it within double quotes. So this formula is saying to Excel, look in this range, but only count up the number of cells that equal and only equal the word pending. Doesn't include the word pending, equals, so the full cell value. As you can see, there are 6 equal the word pending. So let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Perfect. So we know that's counting correctly. So let's look at the number of cells that are shipped. So again, equals COUNTIF. The range. And I said that you would type in the word shipped in there to get the number of cells that are equal to the word shipped. What you can also do is you can also reference other cells as well. So we know that the status value is here within this column. It's a little bit difficult to see. You can't quite see it because of the way that this formatting is worked. But we know it's in column K, row 13. So what we can do is we can actually put just K13. And what Excel will, what you're telling Excel to do there is count the number of cells in that range that are the same as the value in K13. 10. So it's now 10 status is shipped. So we can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Perfect. Now you can also then use relative cell referencing. So you can drag this down, and what it will do is it will then go, okay, count the number of cells within E2 to E18 that is equal to the word cancelled. That's what we want to do. So let's drag this down. 1. And it is 1. It's there. However, if we look at the actual formula, you can see it's actually moved down that range as well that it's looking at. It's moved down the status value that it wants to assess from a criteria perspective, which is perfect. But it's moved this full range down as well, which means that actually it's missing out this top value. So if we could just move that back up, and we know that that range is now correct. So if we were to then, for example, if that become cancelled, for example, you can see now instead of being 10 shipped, it's now 9, and 2 are cancelled. However, if we didn't correct the relative cell reference change, you can see it's moved it down. Therefore, it hasn't included the cancelled value at the very top. So let's just undo that. Okay, so we now have pending as a text string. We have shipped as a cell reference, and we used the drag down to then bring through the number of cancelled orders, and then we corrected the relative cell reference change for that range of cells back to the full data set. So we obviously want to total up the number of records as well. So we can do equals sum. For previous video, if you haven't looked at that, go and take a look at it. It's in the Excel playlist. And you can see there, total number of orders is 17, which again matches the total number of orders here. We've just got 17 used by using count, so we've got 17 here by summing up the number of orders by status. So we've covered count, count A, count blank, and now count if. And finally, we're going to be looking at COUNTIFs. COUNTIFs is just a way for us to add further ranges and criteria into what we want to count. So in this case, we're going to be looking at the number of orders that are pending within north, south, east, and west, shipped within north, south, cancelled, and total them all up. So let's get started. So equals COUNTIF with an S, counts the number of cells specified by a given set of conditions or criteria. So it is slightly different in the fact that the criteria range is set, well, it's set first like count, like COUNTIF, but then you add more criteria ranges and criterias as you go along. So I'll show you. So the criteria range that we want to look at first is the status. So the range is the status, and the criteria is pending. So again, that's in column K. In this case, it's row 18. So K18. that is just looking at the number. That will just return the number of orders with a pending state. So if we just close that bracket, so we say we have the same number as just COUNTIF. What we want to do is, though, we want to look at the number, we want to return the number of orders with a pending state just in the north delivery region. So we'll go back into the formula, and as you can see here, you've got criteria range 2. So we can press comma, and we'll add in another range, the delivery region. And then the criteria of that criteria range will be north. Okay, so we have one order that is pending within the north delivery region. So let's have a look. There's north, north, there it is, north, north. Don't think there's any more. No, so again, there's the one. Perfect. Let's do the same. We can drag this along using relative cell referencing, and what it will do is it will then pull across south, but unfortunately what it will do is it will also move across this to here. So as you can see here, this orange is now, it's now looking at the number. So let's just drag that across, so then we can correct that, but it's also doing it for this range here as well. So let's drag that across back to the status, and drag that across back to delivery region. So we have 2 pending in the south, so south, south, south. And there's the 2 pending. Don't think there's any more. I haven't missed any. Nope. And so on and so on. So we can drag those across, all the way across, and then correct those. So if we were to then sum up the total number of orders pending, we have 5, which doesn't match this. And that's because we have a blank delivery region. And that's when context needs to be given to the data. So you could add a blank value in here and see what that does. Alternatively, you just leave it as it is and understand that actually there are only 5 orders in a pending state with a delivery region assigned. Okay, so let's drag these down 1. And let's correct these. So again, back to there, change that to make sure that it includes all of those values. 9. So we have 9 shipped, which matches, because the one with the blank delivery region is the pending value. And then finally, cancelled. Again, let's do some correct. Let's drag that down. Does that equal 2? Yes, it does. 2 cancelled. And then we can sum these up as well. And then again, using the relative cell reference, just drag that across. Format that a bit nicer. And there. So we've covered the count function. We've covered the count A function, count being number of numeric values in a range, count A being the number of cells that are not blank, count blank being the opposite, number of cells that are blank. We've also covered COUNTIF, which is counting the number of cells that match a given criteria, and then COUNTIFS, which is counting the number of cells that match a given multiple criteria within particular ranges. And that's it for the Excel count function. Hopefully it's been helpful. If it has, give it a thumbs up, and yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.